for Redden from the department. It'll take you through the new high school graduation requirements. Well, they're not actually new, but the high school graduation requirements. And I think the commissioner alluded to that in her remarks about how we get to the next level and the plane where Massachusetts is right now. So without further ado, Lisa, it's all yours.
Why we are landed where we did, and then how we can move forward to make sure that our students are prepared for our open doors to college and or career. So you're going to see some great pictures of our education equity audit that we did during this process of getting through to the regulations, where we involved students and families and stakeholders, which I'll take you through, a lot of student voice, and it really had a lot of engagement to be able to land where we did in regards to the regulations. So as part of our initial tour, we worked and we were in all corners of the state. So RIDE is required to hold 2 public hearings anytime that we open up regulations. There's a 30-day public comment period. We held 7 over 60-plus days of formal public comment. We had additional hearings, and we also had some town hall meetings. But you can see here we were all over the state, and I'm sure many of you in this room, or maybe your predecessors, if you were not in your positions during this time, were involved in giving some feedback on some of these hearings and presentations that we gave in many of our public libraries. As we started going through this process, there were a lot of things that kept coming up. So common themes around special education, around world languages, around do they still have to take art and PE. And so as these topics came up, we really felt it was important to hold some specific town hall meetings around these topics that were getting a lot of interest and activity. So we held town halls on civics and the arts. We did them in partnerships with Onward We Learn. Some of you may know them as College Crusade in the past. We held different conversations also in many languages to be able to reach more people, to get what was the real conversation around the new regulations. In all of this, we had 433 public comments in total. And I say that that's, you're like, what, is that a big deal? Like, do we normally get that many? This is 402 more than when we went out for public comment in 2016. So you can see how that's generated a lot more interest. And so people, either they were more interested in some of the changes, or this is a great thing because now we're seeing more people getting involved in making these decisions. You all, the educators, administrators, family members, really getting involved in what's going to be really molding our students' future and what that looks like. So it's exciting to see so many people were involved in those discussions. Oops, sorry. So here you go. 2016, and we made a lot of changes back in 2016. To 2022, so it's just a little visual here. And these are the folks that we talked to, amongst others, but we went to anyone who would listen to us. My colleague, Steve Osborne, who led a lot of this work, he'll tell you they literally went anywhere anyone would be willing to listen to them. So he may have presented to you all back then as well, but we met with a lot of groups to get a lot of information so we could make sure that our students were actually being heard, parents are being heard, students are being heard. But really the loudest voice that, when we start looking at some of these comments that I'll be posting here shortly, the loudest voice were our students. Our students told us a lot about what they were and were not seeing in high school, and some of the conversations, I had the pleasure of being in a district that really did a deep dive into what we were offering in high school as part of the XQ work. And their voices are amazing, and they want to be involved in financial literacy and be civically ready to be able to vote and participate in their local and national government And so it was just amazing to hear what they had to say as we went through this process. So as mentioned, so not only did we see a significant increase in comments that were given, it actually was the most commented set of regulations that has ever gone through Rhode. So this has been received the most comments in all of our time that we've kind of started keeping track of this type of thing. So really at the end of the day, we are trying to make sure that our students are ready to move into their future with open doors. And we talk about the open doors for college and or career readiness. We don't want them to be pigeonholed into one option or the other. And so what we found is that sometimes that wasn't always happening. So a lot of the regulations that the requirements that we're going to go through, you may notice, like, oh, that's not a really big change. We had 4 math and you're still requiring 4 math. Looks a little different. We had 3 science, we still require 3 science. But some of the way that we have adjusted it really is allowing students to make sure that they are, in fact, able to participate in those, the next steps after high school. The goal here was to really take a look at how we are going to implement these. We reflected on what we heard, and now is our plan to help you all and our districts and our families and our students implement these regulations. So we're going to go through the overview. And our regulations are really kind of fall into 3 buckets. So you have this information, and it's really broken down. So I'm going to take you through some of that in this presentation. But we have 3 priorities in our secondary regulations. So you can see here that Rhode Island will prepare our graduates to create their own future. Rhode Island will increase engagement through real-world relevant learning experiences. That we heard a lot from our students about. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And Rhode Island will change how we support our children and families. That's changed as well. Certainly we have a higher demand on what our youth are being required to do outside of school and where we are as a nation. So let's take a look at priority 1 and really looking at the why. So these comments here that you see written, it was part of our listening tour. So we had at Waterfire, we do an event for teacher recognition. So we had a great event there with a lot of these types of postings where people could come and write questions, comments, thoughts on what we saw the need in our high schools. And so these are, so we try to base these back into the why. This is what we heard. This is not coming from, me at the Rhode Island Department of Ed. This is really what we heard in these listening tours. And, in this one here, I find that really jumped out for me anyway, was around the high school graduation requirements and college admission requirements are misaligned. So although Rhode Island College, URI, and our local institutions, they haven't changed their admission requirements in all of this, but how we were guiding students to get there was not always equitable. So if you happen to, have a great school counselor, or you knew that you were going to be doing, going into a 4-year college, your school counselor was helping you navigate. For example, the math. We still needed 4 math to graduate. It was any math. And so, but to go to RIC and URI, you need Algebra 2. That's their requirement. And so unless you were misaligned with that, some students may have them and some may not. We'll see that in a moment on what was happening as we went through here. But that was what was happening. So we had requirements, the colleges had separate requirements, and unless you were really strategic and you had a school counselor or an adult that was helping you guide your way to get through these, then you may not be in a position where you could graduate and go right into these local colleges. And so this is what we saw. So in that education equity audit that we did, we looked at transcripts. We collected transcripts from students all across the state, had a deep dive, and even some of our administrators, we did this with superintendents, we did this with principals, parents were there, children were there, and people were actually like visibly upset to the point of even crying, because they felt like all this time they thought that they were preparing our students to be able to go to school, and then we were realizing that these type of statistics were happening, that kids were not getting what they needed. 8 out of 10 of our high school seniors said that they wanted to attend a 2 to 4 year college, but only 6 out of those 10 enrolled in the courses that they actually needed to graduate. So if you don't know that you need 2 years of a world language to go to URI, and you don't take that because nobody told you or it wasn't required, then you are automatically at a disadvantage in not being able to apply to our own state institutions. And another concern is that 5 out of 10 of these students were passing these courses. So on top of all, we're not preparing our students to be ready for this coursework, to even go into these programs. We don't want our students, and I'm sure you all too, don't want your families, your constituents, your own children, yourself, to have to go to a program and then take remediation, right? Who wants to go and then having to spend more money on college work to have to go back and take some remedial math or remedial writing? So we want them to be prepared not only with the courses that they're taking, but being able to pass those courses. And that is something that we were not seeing. Schools thought they were doing a great job. They were offering a lot of things. The kids were meeting the graduation requirements, but to go back to that original quote, they were just a little bit misaligned. So what you'll see in the presentation in the requirements is that every student, the default will be college and or career readiness pathway. So we want every student to be able to apply to URI, Rhode Island College, CCRI, any others, and be eligible to be able to start. That is the default. So it no longer depends on whether you had an adult that was guiding you there. So that'll be the default. You'll see here, and this is on the back of one of your handouts, because this is a little tiny. So I made sure the team, I got that ready for you in your packet. This maps out basically what is needed, what is required to go into our local institutions, and some of the changes that are made. So you'll see here some of the bigger shifts is, we've moved from 4 math credits to 4 credits that include algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. And then the 4th math should be in advanced math. What we were seeing a lot is that 4th math is going back to all kinds of things, consumer math, lower level math. So they were maybe getting math and then going backwards into a lower level math class. So we want all students to be prepared. Students cannot come into 9th grade and be ready to jump into algebra if they have not had the support. So what the commissioner mentioned, really focusing on the instruction, that's the next piece, right? So we want our kids to make sure that they are ready when they get into 9th grade to be able to do this coursework. So it's on all of the programs, all of the teachers, to make sure that we're teaching to content standards, that we're using our high quality curriculum materials, and that students are on grade level or working towards grade level, all students, and all meaning all. So this applies to our students that are differently abled as well as our multi-language learners. So it's that instruction. This is where instruction, our MTSS programs, really making sure that our students are getting the supports that they need. An interesting one to note here as well is science. So we've always required 3 years of science. That has not changed. What we now require are 2 years of that to be a lab science. And so you'll see in the documents, what defines a lab science, and obviously having those hands-on experience. You can't just learn science from a textbook and answer questions and not have any hands-on experience. The colleges want to see lab science. And sometimes that's just how it's even really listed on your transcripts. So as you go through your district's course catalog, take a look at, first example, how your science is listed. So if you are teaching science and their course doesn't say that it's with a lab, Rick and URI or any other institution for that matter does not know that it necessarily has a lab in it. So if it's not listed in the course catalog that it has labs, and if it's not listed on your transcripts that it has a lab, the schools are not going to count that as a lab science. So they are looking at your student applies to a school, they go through your transcript, and if it just has courses on there without lab. I personally went through that with some of the Project Lead the Way curriculum when I was in Foster Gloucester, and they were not counting one of the classes as, like, if you're familiar with Project Lead the Way, the whole program is hands-on and it's labs. And so we just needed to make that clear. So we made those changes in our course catalog, we made the changes on our transcript, and URI and Rick gladly took those as lab sciences. So some of those are the things to think about if you're struggling with some of that in your district, is to look at how it's listed and how you're talking about it in your course catalog. Be able to apply. We do have ways, if you are a proficient in language, whether you're a multi-language learner or a student that has been studying another world language, in addition to learning, English as your first language, it didn't matter. You are able to test out. So we have many resources and on the website, as well as I think in your packet. We'll take you there as well, to be able to have students take nationally normed tests to be able to demonstrate proficiency. And you can put that on your transcript and count that as a credit. So a student does not necessarily have to sit through 2 full years of a world language to meet this requirement. So it's thinking through those ways of how do I make sure I note it. If your world language at the middle school, for example, is truly comparable to high school, and it's not just a cultural awareness or an introduction. If you're doing Algebra 1, if you're doing world language, Spanish 1, and it's comparable to the high school level, you can note that on your high school transcript. It does not all have to come in during your high school years. So really thinking through that, some of that is listed in the frequently asked questions, some of that is listed in our specific documents, and I'll get to that, where all those resources are at the end of the presentation, but things to think through. So as you're working with your superintendent, your principals, on what does this look like for your families, really diving into, are we doing these things, what aren't we doing, and how can we, adjust those. You might find that you're maybe in much better shape than you thought, and then maybe you're just focusing on a couple of specific areas. Again, nothing has changed with arts and phys ed. Art is required as part of the BEP, so that is still something that is in our graduation requirements. It's a law that students need to take PE and health every year, so that hasn't changed. How we have it listed here may look a little different, but none of that has changed. Really, those the world language, the math, and the science are the biggest as far as the credits go. Still requiring 20 credits, and then you have some opportunities to tackle all the additional credits. So again, that is the default. So I want to emphasize kind of the default, but not everyone is going to necessarily follow the default, right? We all have students that you can probably think of, and maybe even some of your own children, perhaps, that may not fit into this category. But what we want to emphasize is that it shouldn't be just based on luck and who you have back at your school, but also it shouldn't just be a blanketed, just because I am a multi-language learner, I can't do these things. That is 100% wrong, and we see that once our students are reaching language proficiency, they're actually doing as well, and in many cases actually outperforming our students on our state assessments once they reach that language proficiency. They can do it. Again, it goes back to instruction. Our differently abled students, there should not be in your district where if a student has an IEP, nope, automatically disqualifies them from being able to accomplish Algebra 2. 100% not true. So again, we want to make sure they have the supports. They need the supports all the way along. Students shouldn't be just taking, low-level math all the way up until 8th grade and then be expected to magically take Algebra 1. When I was a math teacher in great city of Woonsocket. That was one of the first things that we did when we shifted. So many of you, if you've been around for a while, remember when we went to state testing by course level. So this was back in like the kneecap days. And one of the test was algebra. And so there was a movement statewide that making sure that every student in 9th grade took algebra. And my life skills special ed teacher, we adopted him into the math department. He taught the same book that we did. He adapted it to meet the needs, and I'm telling you, the things that these kids were doing were amazing. They understood input-output. They understood slope. It's in a different way. You're talking about it in much more hands-on. The kids can do it if the instruction is there, the motivation is there, And it was a struggle. You know, we had folks who were like, the kids are never going to be able to do algebra. They can do algebra. So we just need to provide that scaffolding, those supports, and again, it cannot wait until they're in 9th grade. I can't emphasize that enough. But if there are the students that do need a modification to this, for whatever reason, it will be with the support and consent of their parent or guardian. So again, this is not to luck. This will be mapped out in their individualized learning plan. So students, once they become in 6th grade, they should be mapping out their plan. So all the way back in 6th grade, as they're thinking about what they're wanting to do after high school, but even what they want to do in high school, making sure they have those supports needed. When they get to the high school, if it is decided that, and we'll talk about some specific examples, but if they know that they're going right into the military, or they know that they're going to a specific career that they're not going to do higher ed, again, it's a decision with the parent, it's documented in their plan, and there's a very specific plan to make sure that they are ready. So I just want to emphasize enough. Nobody should be making this decision for the children or without the parents' involvement and permission to be able to do so. So each one of these is individualized, but we do not want to have a blanket group of saying that all students with a certain label of sorts that they can't do these things. We want them to have the golden ticket. We want them to be able to get into their college of choice, if that's where they're going, and making sure that they are able to meet the requirements. So we have here in Rhode Island the unique opportunity to get a free associate's degree and now a free bachelor's degree through the Rhode Island Promise and Hope scholarships. FAFSA is the gatekeeper for that. So students are encouraged, strongly encouraged. Our schools actually have that challenge. The regulations are actually really been shifted to the schools to make this happen. So this is not a student requirement, but it is a school requirement. We are going to be reporting that out on those student report cards that you see, the school report cards. Eventually it will likely be part of our accountability system as well, but for now we're reporting out. And happy to say Rhode Island, I think, is number 3 right now nationally on the percent of students that have completed the FAFSA at this point. So we have really worked hard. Our school counselors are working hard to make sure that their principals to have opportunities. So hopefully you've seen in your district whether there's FAFSA nights and how to help parents and students fill out their FAFSA, or the state, the alternative state financial aid form if they're unable to do the FAFSA for any reason. These federal Pell Grants, you do not need to pay back. So, we're leaving free money on the table. Kids are thinking that they can't or afford to go to school, and many of them can. So, as I mentioned, we're working to add this to our accountability, but we are currently reporting on it. But this year has been a little challenge. So you may have been hearing things back in your district, and so we do want to give you this, a person and a resource to help. So the FAFSA, has had a late rollout. They've had some issues with their platform. This is not a RIDE thing. This is a federal thing. We've been providing supports, but what's happening in all of this, and you may be following the news, we're watching it closely. The person who oversees FAFSA has just recently stepped down because of some of the problems. And you may be hearing from your current seniors that, I can't make a decision because I don't know what my package is yet. Usually they know by now, and they're making decisions. The one good thing I can report out on is that Rick and URI have extended their deadline for being able to provide them with a commitment letter. So often you need to be committing on where you're going at this point. So all of our local institutions have adjusted those timelines. This is causing a trickle effect for everybody. So the colleges are not sure who's going to be coming. I'm hoping we don't see a down tick in the number of students that attend because of this. So hopefully this will be resolved soon. But at RIDE, we do have a school counselor specialist on staff. So her name is Anna Holland. That's her email address. If anyone in your district or your district staff need any support, please feel free to reach out to her. I'll make sure Tim has this presentation and gets it out to you all so you have that also, but you're welcome to jot that down. But we will continue to monitor the situation, continue to provide supports as needed. We work closely with the schools to make sure that they're, one, continuing on with FAFSA submissions, but also hopefully we will get this resolved sooner rather than later to make sure our students are able to participate. Another component added to the graduation requirements is the student resume. So as part of our individualized learning plan that starts in 6th grade that I mentioned, that kind of maps out this curriculum that we should be doing through our school counselor framework, throughout their middle school and high school career, students should be, examining career opportunities and thinking about what they want to be doing and doing interest surveys. So there's a lot that's built into that curriculum, the school counseling curriculum, and you're documenting that along the way in your individualized learning plan. Part of that component, so this was already in place in the individualized learning plan, the ILP, was by the time they graduated, they were to complete a resume. And again, depending on how your district is implementing the ILP, so some of you may be aware of it, maybe some of you are not sure. Most districts have some type of platform that has all of these components in there. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. Those are some of those questions to be asking yourself and talking with your superintendents and your staff to make sure that, where does this get kept? When do we look at it? Who's doing it? Who's responsible for it? All those are good questions. So now it's part of the requirements. So students are, so again, this is on the schools to make sure that they are completing this resume. And we want the resume to be a reflection of all of those other activities. So, we think about if you're in sports and clubs and those types of things are important as well, but also what college credits did they earn? Did they do any dual enrollment? Did they do any work-based learning opportunities? All of those things so we can really, students can really be highlighting all of their hard work as they go through high school to gain some meaningful employment, whether that's directly out of high school, while they're going to college, working part-time, being able to have the students on the same or have that advantage to be able to move into gaining meaningful employment, the real world. And kids, they're like, now is real world. Like, this is my life, this is real world. I can't wait until after I go to high school to then go to the real world. When is this so-called real world thing happening, right? Is not this present moment everyone's real world, whether you're, regardless of your age? So they were not making those connections. They didn't see what the point and what the connection was to anything that they were interested in, how that was connecting. They didn't know what they were voting on and how to vote. They didn't know, a whole host of things. I was talking about, FAFSA and going off to college. They didn't know anything about a budget, how to, deal with purchasing or leasing a vehicle. How do I manage a budget? All of these important things we didn't have as part of our graduation requirements. And so they wanted to see what we were doing, how is this engaging them? So one here is, financial literacy is one of the most important skills we can make sure our students have before graduating. We don't want them going into, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. So this again comes from that audit that I talked about as we walked in and met with 40 different high schools across the state on surveying students, surveying teachers, parents, again, probably many of you all, on what is it that they wanted to see. And what was interesting is that 1 in 2 students here were worried about having the opportunity to pursue their passions during high school. Only 1 in 4 students believe that their classes always give them useful information for what they plan to do. 1 out of 4. That's kind of, so we talk about it's just, we see situations in high school and the kids are not engaged. They're not engaged. And so again, this, the requirements that we will outline here is hopefully bringing those experiences to Reimagine High School. So the first one is that we added to our requirements is civics. So kids are needing to demonstrate proficiency in civics to graduate from high school. This is actually a Rhode Island general law that we added into our requirements. So as you probably know, we have many regulations and laws that aren't always in our other pieces. So this was not part of our graduation requirement, although the legislation had passed. And so marrying those two together to make sure there's a double whammy that it's definitely happening. So students need to demonstrate proficiency. This does not mean it has to be a separate course. So as you're thinking back through this, when you have opportunity to kind of talk through this with your team or back at your district when you return, this does not need to be a separate standalone class. It does not need to have a certain number of credits or any credits. It can be built in. This could be part of your U.S. history class. This could be part of an opportunity in advisory, if you have some kind of advisory program or intervention block or an enrichment block. So these types of activities, there's some requirements around what that looks like that, again, we have documentation you'll find on the website that lists, like, what is it, what should it compose of, how do I put it on my transcript, but wanting to make sure that our kids are graduating from high school proficient in civics. The next one is financial literacy. Touched upon that one a little bit, but really making sure that our students, again, are literate in their financial futures. This too does not need to be a standalone. It can. Some districts are actually having a course. We have free resources that we've provided. We've done some professional learning with teachers. We have free resources that are available to all districts. One that comes to mind off the top of my head is EverFi. It's a module-based where, you know, students go at their own pace. They get a certificate at the end. They can be showing that. So I know Barrington, for example, I don't know if anyone's from Barrington. My understanding is, you know, Barrington does that as part of their advisory program through their high school, the 4 years. So as long as by the time they're done high school, that they have that in there. So again, it can be a standalone course. Many are offering multiple options. So you have a menu. There's a handful of different ways that you can achieve this. And if a student would rather have some modules as opposed to a course, it could be part of a program. Westerly, as part of their cosmetology program, they have a huge financial literacy component because a lot of those students are moving into, you know, they need to learn how to rent a chair or own a business or those types of things, right? It's not just, you know, all hair and makeup and nails. You want to, you know, you need to know the budget part of that. So they've built it into their CTE program. Kids don't need to take it separately. It's not another thing. So if anywhere that you can build it into one of your CTE programs, so you're not feeling like, how are the kids going to get it all in, you're welcome to do that. So we have a host of options, and the team is happy to support districts in figuring that one out. As well as computer science. So we have computer science proficiencies that we have mapped out on the things that students need to know. Those, again, can be in a standalone course. We have partnered with the University of Rhode Island through our Computer Science for Rhode Island grant. So we have free courses, the curriculum's there, the material's there. Teachers just come, get professional learning. Many can get paid to do that professional learning. They'll get the resources, and you can, you know, literally just take it and implement it as a course. You can embed it into other courses. But this replaces the old tech ed requirement. So everybody had to show some kind of technology proficiency. This replaces that. Again, like I mentioned, there's no changes to the arts. So students need to still demonstrate proficiency in the arts as a graduation requirement. But here we have a little flexibility for our students that are taking CTE, or they're taking dual enrollment. So if they're participating in any of the, you know, their senior year, they're doing programs such as Running Start or similar programs in some of our other universities. If their CTE program is requiring certain things that they know that they are not moving on to a specific 4-year program that would require, like higher math, for example, there is some flexibility there that allows them to take additional CTE courses in lieu of the 4th math or in lieu of other opportunities, the world language, for example, to give them a little more flexibility to be able to get in these courses. Some of these make sense, right? So if you are going into cosmetology, for example, you may be ready to go right into that workforce when you graduate from high school and may not need that upper level math, and then you're going to focus on other areas. If you're in the engineering pathway program and you're going into engineering, you're going to still want to be taking pre-calculus and those other math. So again, it's going to depend on your coursework and your program, and so again, there's not a blanket. This is individualized. You need to be mapping this out with your students. So this is going to take a lot of effort on the districts of the school staff. You want to make sure that your school counselors are well versed in all of this, supporting them, making sure that they can actually do all of this with your students to make sure that they are getting into the courses, their passions that they may need. Starting to get some guidance, but really trying to look at how can we make sure that you're getting those those grade level requirements in math or whatever that you're looking for, and combining them into courses. So I mentioned like the financial literacy in cosmetology. How can we do some higher level math in our engineering programs, for example, our construction programs, showing that you're able to apply that into your programs, and utilizing your high quality curriculum materials in those courses. So looking at where can we marry those things? How can we make sure that kids are getting both? And then recognizing work-based learning. So I think this is probably a newer area for most districts to start diving into. So how can you give credit to students, not just in CTE, but all students for working, for doing internships? Finding a way that you're setting up a system. Many districts already have internship programs or work-based learning experiences where you're working with your a teacher at school. They're getting credit for working and learning those durable skills, those transferable skills of showing up to work on time, problem solving, all of those other skills that we want our kids to be able to know and be able to show that they can do that. So working with employers, so often that may include having some kind of evaluation or comments about what the kids are doing in their programs. So trying to find, so this is where you all can play a critical role in creating those policies if you don't already have them in place. So again, another thought as you're maybe taking notes on all the things that you need to do when you go back to your district, making sure that you have these. Some districts have, some districts are just starting. If that's something that we'd like to follow up on, we certainly can do more in-depth working with districts to create these policies. And then one last piece that it really kind of falls on Rhode, but many years ago we introduced our diploma endorsements. So as districts, so in addition to CTE, Rhode approved CTE programs, districts have the flexibility of adding in pathways that they can get an endorsement on their diploma that shows that maybe they kind of specialized in something. And they're very specific. So there's the arts and humanities, business economics and data analysis, education, government and human services, communications, science technology. So it's very specific. There's 6 of them. And there's an outline of what they should include, how many classes, what types of things they should be doing. And some districts really took off with these years ago, and others really haven't spent a lot of time in them. But we also want to work with our community partners, our employers, and our higher ed to make sure that they're valued, right? It doesn't really help to have a humanities endorsement on your diploma if it's not really recognized as anything useful, right? So we want to make sure that it's useful. Westerly, for example, I keep going back to Westerly because I've heard a lot of examples from them lately. Westerly has several of these endorsements, and other districts maybe only have 1 or 2, and some may have none. So again, another wondering, does your district offer these opportunities? They're laid out on the Rhode website of what is required, but that's something to check back with your principals, your superintendents to see what is it that we're offering, and are they valuable? What did they say about your student? And then again, another thing to add on to your resume. And then finally, looking at how we're supporting kids. Commissioner also mentioned, the increase in needs certainly around mental health and attendance, but also on what's happening now with our families and our students. So here, again, the why, really trying to make sure that all of our students are supported. And how is, the one quote here that's interesting is the burden to access resource is always on the students and their families. So how can we change that? Instead of having everybody always trying to go in search of finding things, how can we help them with that? It's interesting to note here that we have a lot of students that are earning more credits than they ever did before. So we want to continue that. But knowing here that in addition to everything that's going on post-pandemic, we still have, the students are having to choose. They're having to choose between whether they are, participating in their academics, coming to school, or having that economic security. So we have 42% of our youth are of the households with income below the federal poverty level, so they're trying to help lift our families out of poverty. And 33% of the working class households above twice the poverty line. So we have students that are actually helping their families make ends meet. I don't know about you, you go to the grocery store, like I'm just amazed. I barely have 2 bags of groceries, and it seems like it's twice as much than it ever was. So we're relying on our students to help fill this gap. So students are working in addition to their families to help them just make ends meet. And so we want to figure out a way how to support those. In addition to them having to work, we are also seeing that students are helping to raise other family members or support other adults in their household. So we have 7% of our middle and high school students that report caring for a sibling, a parent, a grandparent for most of the day. So we have students that are coming in late, needing to leave early, or their absenteeism. Again, the commissioner talked about our attendance campaign. How do we help these students that are helping the family just survive? And so if a parent is working 2 and 3 jobs, it's become more reliant on our students to be helping take care of younger siblings. And how does that affect their schooling? It's a great thing to be able to talk about, but how are we going to do this? How can we give students credit or acknowledging that they are taking care of a student or a sibling or a family member? So working with the root. Each individual student has their own issues of what's going on at home and really trying to get at that. So part of your attendance teams that are likely underway this year, really looking at those students and how do we support them to move forward. And then finally here is trying to help keep our parents informed. What was interesting as part of some of the survey work that we did and that education audit that we had is about, do people even know, do parents even know that they are making progress? So how do I know? How do I know if my student is going to be able to, is on the track to graduate? Most don't know. So how are we reporting? So again, thinking back to your information in your district, how are you going to make sure that your districts are notifying parents and students whether or not they're on track to graduate? So thinking about that. So we require that you're providing some annual progress reports, whether that's on your transcript, whether that's through a newsletter, however it is that you want to work that out in your district, that you have flexibility around that, but how are you making sure that you're communicating that out to families and students, that our students are on track to graduate? You have this in your folder. This recaps all of the priorities and why we're doing what we're doing, and making sure that our transcripts are aligned. So what Rhode has been doing in all of this is we created a 5-year plan, and we're supporting the districts and your superintendents, the principals, teachers, to make sure this is happening, and also are here to support you all, and certainly happy to do additional follow-up. So we're almost done, and I'll have you maybe put some thoughts on a sticky note on what supports you think you may need to be able to continue this work. But right now we have community of practices going on. This is the work that we're working on. So we have some partnerships, we have community of practice with principals, with superintendents. They get together regularly. We have topics. We have had sessions about math. How are we really tackling this Algebra 2? How are we helping our multi-language learners? So there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of conversation around all of those pieces. How are we working to engage students? We have guidance documents that we've created and have worked closely with those stakeholders. And so those are also on the website, so anything that you may need. The frequently asked question document that's in your folder has a lot of, that was created with support from your superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, a lot of feedback, back and forth. How can we explain this so everybody knows and can find the answers that they need? So we continue to support the districts. Right now, it's open to all districts. We have a handful that are participating. We have a contract as part of our funding to help support this, to help you all look at your high school schedules. So we've partnered with ABLE. They're a company that will come in, take a look at what you're offering, take a look at all of your restrictions and what you have, and maybe reimagine your schedule. A lot of districts have the same schedule that you've had probably from when you were in school. I think about the 7-period day and the waterfall, and you drop one and they're rotating, and how do you get all of that done in 45 minutes? To trying to find a way to maybe have different schedules, block schedules, allow for work-based learning time, accommodate all of the career and tech situation. So there's a lot there that they can come in for free and meet with your teams to really reimagine what your high school. So if anyone is interested in that as well, you could still, I think there's a page at the end, but you're certainly welcome to reach out to me or to Steve Osborne at Rhode, and we can get you connected with that opportunity if your schools are not participating. It's a great opportunity. No cost to you and no commitment to take it. So they may give you a few options, and you may find a way to work. I know a lot of it is around your limitations with your collective bargaining agreements, but how can you get them involved as well to be able to say, like, maybe this isn't working. Why can't we try something new, give it a whirl, and it may change things. We've talked a lot about that. And so your role. So again, you guys have a role in planning and making sure that there's policies in place, updated policies. Likely all of you have a graduation policy, high school diploma policy. So taking a look at that, making sure it's current with all of this information in it as well. And so there's some districts that are finishing up or have finished, some haven't started. So, we hope to have some kind of sharing. If that's something that you all would be interested in, please, again, make a note of that on a sticky note and stick it up on one of the white papers. Would you like to see model policies? Would you like to see what other folks are doing? Who's done what? So we're happy to, try and create some kind of sharing environment for you all as well, just like we do with the schools. So identifying your strengths. So as I've been talking at you for all this time, not modeling engaging classroom experience, but as you've been thinking through all of this, hopefully maybe you're thinking like, we do that, oh, I don't even know if we do that, have we started that? So really taking this time to think about what are the questions that you need to go back and ask, what is it that your district still need to do? And they may be working on it, maybe they haven't presented it to you all yet, but thinking about all of the things. And so hopefully you were able to go through that and say, we're already doing that, we're already doing that, we're already doing that. You guys are in a great position. And we do have quite a few districts that are in that position. And then just focusing on where you could strengthen some of those opportunities or expand those opportunities. That is, certainly your role, but to help identify your strengths and then focus on where you need to expand on that. And then again, identifying any challenges. Make some notes. I'll give you guys a few minutes before we take a pause, finish up here this morning, to jot down some thoughts. If you have any questions that you want to ask now, certainly you're welcome to take questions. But if there's things specifically of resources, what is it that you need to know, or just wonderings for yourself. So feel free to use those sticky notes and stick them in your packet and take them home. And write yourself questions so you don't forget. So you can go back and ask back in your district, what are we doing about civics? What are we doing about financial literacy? If you don't know those questions, make a few notes, stick them in your packet, and take them home with you to make sure that you get those questions from your superintendent. I think that takes us to the end. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it. There was a lot there. I was trying to talk fast, but a lot to go on. So I think I saw a gentleman in the back raise his hand first, and then.
I understood your presentation to indicate that we're trying to accommodate a student's current interests in what they think their career might be. And I think for years, students have gradually lost interest as the years progress, as they think the courses they're taking have less bearing on what they think they want to do. But what we're trying to do with this is to accommodate interests that may change again. For example, before the first 2 years of college was being paid for by Rhode Island, the Community College of Rhode Island, roughly 85% of the students who would go there needed remedial courses. And as a result, as you well know, many of them dropped out for whatever reasons, but the remedial courses count for no credit. So, but they obviously changed their minds from what they originally intended. So.
Right, and that's what we're hoping to get at. So students should not need to take remedial courses. Did everyone hear his question? Okay. So students shouldn't need to take remedial courses if they're in this default pathway. So everybody now, and so that's exactly what was happening. Students didn't know, so they weren't taking those courses. They weren't taking the 2 years of world language. They weren't taking the higher math. Again, they still met the graduation requirements. They still got a diploma, but to your point, they were not prepared. So when they changed their mind, they decided that they wanted to go to a higher ed, and then they needed to take those remedial courses that didn't count. So this is trying to get at that. So the default of everybody is expected to participate in this diploma system as is, and there should be only a handful, and again, very specific to the parents being involved, the school counselor being involved, to make those decisions. And to your point, yes, there might be that possibility that even if they decide that you're going into the military and everybody's on board and they've got a plan, and there's always going to be those, couple of cases where students then may change their mind. But hopefully that is our point of making this as the default, is that we would still encourage those students that are maybe thinking that they don't need to, would be to go into those. Your student, the students in your district should not be making those decisions by themselves one day on course selection day. I don't know how your districts do it, right? Everyone, it's online, or maybe it's on a piece of paper, and you come home and your child says, oh, I signed up for this, this, and this, and you have no idea what they took or what they were taking. We're trying to flip that and change that. So parents can at least rest assured that their kids, even if they hadn't been involved, are automatically going to be ready for those open doors for whatever they want to do. So you're not reliant on that. The exception would be with parental involvement to make those possible changes. Does that make sense? So really trying to kind of flip that a little bit. Does anyone?
Does Rhode have a model work-based learning policy for us?
We have a definition of the different types of work-based learning. Districts have done different policies that we're happy to share. Right now, we don't have a model policy, but that is something, if you want to put that sticky note up there so I don't forget when I leave, I'm going to take those with me, those white papers. So if that's something that you think would be helpful, then please put that on there, and I can certainly work with the team to see if we can, at minimum, either devise something or work with some districts that have some in place to be able to share those resources as some models, but we're happy to look into that. That's questions everywhere. I think I only have a
Thank you. I was going through one of these pages here, and this really kind of hit me in the face, where it says, to be college eligible, students must successfully complete the required college and preparatory courses. But it said in parentheses, with a D letter grade or better. D is accepted as being successful. And then, again, if our young people see this, it's like back in the day when we put how you would get your grade. Well, what's passing? So a lot of folks, and probably even people, maybe even here, might say, hey, look, I'm not going to strain my brain. I'll pass with a D. that really, as someone who taught for 30 years, it just crushed me.
Obviously, it is our hope that we are not just producing students with just D's, but at least having those requirements. That is what is required from the universities. So, we want them to at least be taking those courses. We would never encourage anyone to just be shooting for a D, but just knowing that, at minimum, and that's why, like, all kids should be able to meet these goals with the supports, even if that is a C or a D. Obviously, we want our students to be reaching for much higher. But that is what's required to go into the colleges.
Committee member, I totally get this. As a parent, I'm kind of horrified that it looks like we're taking away all the fun. Like, we talk about mental health, and just knowing that my child will have to have a resume when they leave high school, I'm like, can't they just be a kid? Like, does she have, like, so that's just it.
Like I mentioned, the resume requirement has actually been in place for several years as part of our individualized learning plan component. So this just kind of emphasizes it. This can be, again, something that's done in advisory, something that is, done as part of a class to be able to highlight and demonstrate what they know. When students are working on their college applications, for example, they often have to demonstrate all of these things. This now has a document that they can actually showcase and be able to have right away. There's still a, right.
If you have a student who is already putting pressure on themselves, they're going to put pressure even more to just fill this resume out. And it's like, we talk about mental health, and we put these implements in place where it's just not good for their mental health.
Right, and that's where you all and the schools come into place, is making sure that the students have those supports. So building those into whether it's courses or advisory time or time with their school counselors to make sure that students have those supports in there to be able to show what they know. But with all of these requirements, there's actually still a lot of flexibility. I showed the slide of, like, kids are getting more credits. You need 20 credits to graduate. Most districts have 28 credits or more that kids have available to them to be able to, as they go through their 4 years. So there's still quite a bit of flexibility there of what's required versus what they have left to be able to take electives, to be able to try a CT pathway and then switch into a different CT pathway. That was something that we were actually, yes, we want to see kids completing if they go into a program, but you know what? It's just as valuable as a student going from one pathway. And I think about when I was in Foster Gloucester, we took kids to the hospital. They were doing the biomed pathway. This young lady, she was going to be a doctor. She couldn't wait, and we went to the hospital, and we went to the emergency room, and it has that different smell to it. And we got there, and she passed out. And she was like, I don't think this is what, and so it's valuable, right? You don't want to be spending all that money on college and then to find out later that you don't want to be a doctor when you're 3 years in. So there's some value to and being able to explore. And so there is still that flexibility of starting and trying. And that's what the commission was getting at, the CT for all. Kids should have some opportunities to be able to sample different things, whether it's a formal CTE, a program, or other classes that really allow them that opportunity to explore different career opportunities. I think that's all. I'll try to do one more. I'm not sure what time it is.
Just a short comment about the resume. That can be so tailored to participated in recreational soccer, took dance classes, was in a hiking club. It doesn't have to be stellar GPA or worked at a family business. I mean, some children are literally involved in their family. So it's not, the pressure is not to put, like the resume is like, okay, this is going to make it or break it, so we got to build your resume with necessarily work experiences, but it's to showcase what they've enjoyed, too. Yeah, well, I think accomplishments might sound a little bit more. Yeah.
So, right.
Will we give equal credit to those real life experiences? It's not just a resume of your work, your academic, but your actual real life experiences.
Right.
Be proud of what your accomplishments are.
Agreed. Agreed. And that's where you all have some flexibility on how you want to award credits for certain things, if they can demonstrate certain criteria. So there's that, and that's what the reference is around, finding ways to demonstrate work-based learning and how to get credit for those types of things, offering internship programs so kids can be demonstrated that. But to your point is, I mentioned that a lot of our students are taking care of their younger siblings, other people. I think kids think that just because I am not on, on the honor society, or I'm not in every single club, that I don't have the skills to highlight. And to your point, trying to really illustrate and not try to give added pressure. But when you start sitting down with a student and they think about all of the accomplishments and really digging deep into, there's something to be said for a student who's working to help support their family and helping, take care of their sibling, to put those skills down. They're reliable, they're responsible, all of those components, and really highlighting those attributes that kids, I think that, well, I don't have anything to show that I, should either be accepted into this college or should be given this job. And how can we just be creative in making sure that we're capturing all of that so kids do feel like they have opportunities when they leave high school. So with that, I'll give you all a few minutes while I pack up and get stuff. We're heading to the next event. So please feel free, any of those, or if you want to consolidate, any other resources that you would like, any questions that didn't get answered that you may have, feel free to jot them on the sticky note, put them up on one of those boards, and I will make sure that, one, we get the slides to Tim to disseminate. I didn't do that beforehand. So he can send those out, and I'll make sure he can send out my contact information and Steve Osborne's information. He's been working with different groups throughout the state. We're happy to come meet with, just as the UCOA team mentioned, we're happy to come meet, with school committees or groups of people. We have gone out and met with principals and superintendents in a lot of districts. So you may or may not be aware of that, but if you would like that to happen, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help there too, and anything we can do to support. But I know a lot of you have been implementing this and working on this and have a lot of great ideas. Maybe you have some questions, but how can we really make sure that our kids are engaged, reimagining the high school experience so all of our kids have those same opportunities that we would want for our own children. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day. I know you have I'm standing between you and lunch and then awards. And if you do have time, I don't know, Tim, with your, the rest of the schedule, feel free to play around with that scavenger hunt. I know we didn't have time at the beginning, but if there's time and you're here with your team, feel free to play with that a little bit, and certainly reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa.